So welcome to the Zoom Q&A. Today's topic is it time to light it on fire? How to know when to make the big decision. And this is an important one for Christine and I, near and dear to our heart. Allie too, but Allie's taking care of family today. So she has got other values that she is satisfying on this day. We're going to start with the reconciliation moment. Now, this being the weekend of May 5th, but May 4th in the land we know as Canada is a day to honor and acknowledge and missing murdered Indigenous women and girls. And this is very near and dear to our hearts. And just to acknowledge that there is like it's not a concept of racism, but this is one of those real, actual situations where Indigenous women and girls regularly can't access safety, can't the things that other folks that aren't Indigenous women and girls can access around um, police protection or having access to justice if something does happen to them. This is a situation where we're being asked to look at where are Indigenous women and girls missing and murdered with no police um, intervention. And I know that this is one of those real topics that is not just theoretical, but actual. And it's one of those ways that we can acknowledge that racism exists systemically in our organizations or in our society, and it's not okay. And we need to find ways to draw that out and talk about that and say that's we know it's there. It's not a concept or a theoretical situation. This is real, and we know this is true. And I'm going to leave that as our reconciliation moment. Just a reminder that to Gavin and Christina, this is being recorded. Um, because it's we've had so many interactions with Gavin, we're going to just move past the introductions because you know who we are. And so we'll just move into this incredibly fun topic. Is it time to light it on fire? And how to know when to make that big decision. And now Christina and I have both, and Gavin, I'm sure you can relate to this as well, have done that big leap, made those big decisions, took that life that we're in and said, I choose something different and lit it on fire, made a big leap and recreated a new life. Um, and for me, I'll just talk about, for me, this one has been difficult because I don't know when to quit. I'll just do some self reflection, and it's because I have this really strong value around perseverance and resilience, and that comes from growing up in a very challenging childhood where I'm like, okay, this isn't the worst. Should I? Couldn't I just make do? And can I just get through this? Um, and that kind of like reality of like I can thrive in this. And just because I can doesn't mean I should. And so I know that I've stayed in situations far longer than I could have. Um, and it was a very difficult decision for me to make big transition changes. And I also have done it many times in my life where I've literally thrown everything out the window and started from scratch and just been like, this is big enough. It's time. And for me, when it's time, it's time. I don't mess around, but I give it a good long couple years think before I make that go. Um, so for example, I'll just talk about my one example. Uh, Many years ago, choosing to leave my career in a major oil and gas company, like one of the big fives, lots of career structure, good financial compensation, all those like great pensions and all those pieces. And I decided to move to another city to be a consultant much less secure, leaving my then long, very long term relationship, my friend group, to start over in a new city. Now, what I was leaving was a very abusive work situation, and it took way longer than it needed to for me to make that decision. Um, and I wish that I had access to the VBL decision making process, but it wasn't in my life at that time. I hadn't found it. No regrets. It's harder than it needed to be. And I remember wishing that I had a mentor who was able to put aside their need to control my choices, or to direct my life through their needs. I really wish I had that. Um, but I didn't. And I wish I had that um, wise woman in my life, or wise person to be able to help me figure things out for me. And I didn't. I really didn't. But I turned myself into that. And I learned how to do that for myself, and how to be really conscious of how I did that, and turn myself into that wise woman, and now help other people. Um, right, make, like, document that journey. And it's not like, here's my journey and now use it for you. It's, here was the structure of my journey, how can this work for you in a way that's um, mutable for your values. So I'll just put a little pin there, and then I'll ask Christina, like, tell me about a time when you've lit it on fire and started again.
Hmm. Thanks, Corrine. I love that we're able to get vulnerable today. Yeah, I had a hard time trying to choose just one because, like you, I've made a few pretty major decisions in my life. But one in particular that I wanted to talk to, and because I'm sure lots of people can relate, is choosing to break connection with a toxic family member, where I severed all communications with them. And this could be relatable even to if you're in a relationship with a partner or a family member. But I was in a very abusive relationship with my mother, where we would consistently, she would be condescending. She would love to tell me the reasons why I'm a horrible person, and how I could always do better without, a solution. And I would also actually receive some threatening and degrading letters every so often in the mail from her. Needless to say, when my parents had split, that's where the rifts had happened. So for about 11 years, I was attempting to rectify the problems, have conversations, getting to the bottom of what is happening. Why is this happening? And can we work on it? Can we um, try and rebuild this relationship? Because, you know, especially being a mother, you're supposed to have that really close bond, that connection. And we once were very close. And eventually, after those 11 years of back and forth, and yeah, I'll do better, and then it doesn't. It just kind of, history repeats itself. I came to that realization that this person's not going to change, despite what they're going to say. It would just be random blow-ups, random letters, and I actually grew anxious anytime I received letters in the mail, thinking it was from her. And when I did, I would just get in my head for weeks and like analyze everything, every word that they written down, or the conversations we had, and it would bother me and stress me out for a couple weeks. And that affected my own life because then I was on edge in my own relationships with my children, my husband, at work, and so on. I felt my energy draining as I held these conversations with her, responded to these letters. It takes a lot of prep work to have these crucial conversations. And I then came to realize after a time, and I've been with VBL for a few years into this, and I'm very grateful to have the coaching with Corrine for to help me walk through reminding me of how to use my values in this big decision, because I came to the realization that I needed to protect my own well-being. This was a toxic relationship and nothing was going to change, and I put my time in. However, I was really torn because one of my values is my top 5 values is connection. And that breaking a relationship with your own mother, there would be a lot of judgment from other people, but as well as for myself, because I feel like I'm giving up on that core value of mine. However, I also realize that boundaries that I've set that are also very important were not being respected. And my other value of service, safety, security, all of those were being frustrated at that time. And I also needed to do what was right for myself. So that's where I'll leave it. But yeah, it was a very difficult decision to actually cut those ties, and best decision I've ever made. It's been almost 2 years now, and I'm the happiest that I could be. And my relationship with my family is a lot stronger because I don't have that added stress.
I love that so much. And I think that one around, like, yeah, exactly, Gavin. Like, ugh, we feel that in our hearts. That is a really big decision to make with huge implications. And I love this, that especially that value and connection, where you're like, I am making a decision if I go through this to frustrate that value. And what it turned out was that you actually satisfied that value through connection to yourself and through connection with other family members. And yeah, and that I think is one of those like funny little byproducts, but where it's a really important that we notice, how has my behavior frustrated it, and how could my behavior satisfy it? And then if, even if it's not going to be like something that you can do on purpose, but you can continue to track it. How is that satisfying my value of connection? Is it happening because I feel pretty connected? I feel pretty good. How is that happening? Where is that happening? Well done, me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Good job, Christina. I love that so much. That is again, like very relatable. I've done the same thing, needed to do the same. And it's a very difficult choice that is very like personal. And I think these kinds of big life decisions for me come down to, where am I acknowledging, like you said, acknowledge that power. Where am I leaking my power or giving my power away? And that's a clear sign this is not a healthy space. And where am I self betraying in order to maintain this relationship? Um, which is really, really difficult to one notice, because it's easier to notice when somebody else has betrayed us. But when I have betrayed me, it's harder to track and notice. But our psyche definitely notices and gives us real life, real time consequences of that. And it's actually even more important than when somebody else betrays, because a bigger self betrayal is like that. That's the biggest. And when we can get in front of that and change that around, it makes a big difference, because that's the one piece we have control over.
Absolutely. And I love that you say it that way, because one of the huge takeaways that allowed me to make that decision was the fact of, I'm making this decision not out of spite for this person, but I'm making this decision out of love for myself. And I know, again, when you're making these big decisions, you can't just let your emotions run you. You have to really think about, what does this mean for myself? What is being satisfied? What am I losing? What am I gaining? What are my fears of if I do make this decision or if I don't? Um, but but doing so in a loving manner of, for in my example, it was, I acknowledge that things are not going to improve. And because they're not improving, And until they are going to improve and you're ready to, put on your adult pants and treat me with respect, then I do not want to hear from you via email. I do not want to get letters. I will not bring my kids around. I will let them meet their grandma when they're old enough and they want to meet them. And just until you are ready to treat me with respect, and then I will be there. But until now, I am done. I need to protect myself and my well-being, because this is actually what I'm experiencing and what I'm feeling. Instead of, because I could have absolutely said, like, you are a horrible person and I don't want to talk to you anymore. Um, but instead of that spitefulness, that allowed me to live in integrity with my values, and also not trying to get her to appease my values and need what I need to satisfy what I need. I'm satisfying myself. I'm having that control of what I can do for me. And yeah, that made it okay for me to make that big decision. Despite what other people say or think, I'm able to still stand with integrity of my values, because I know that it was the best decision for me out of love for myself.
Yeah. And what you're describing is that space of um, standards of behavior for yourself, that are far more important than conditions of relationship, of um, forcing someone to appease or change their behavior. Like they could have, your mom could have changed her behavior because of your actions, but you started first with, what do I need? And how do I do this in a way that is in alignment, and creating some standards of behavior, expectations for your behavior in this really difficult situation. How do I do this in a way that satisfies, not just as an end result, but in the process of how I do it, also satisfies it starts with, why am I doing it? How do I do it? And how do I live with the consequences? All of those, you put that thought and effort into, this is how I'm going to do it in a way that meets my values, and I'm taking care of myself, living in integrity. And I am, regardless of the consequences, regardless if she came back and she was like, golly, I never noticed that I was such, I was doing this, or you've given me the impetus to change. And, and she could have, but that would have been a byproduct, a lovely byproduct. But in the end of it, regardless of how she reacted, you created safe space around integrity with your values. God damn. That's huge. That's amazing. I'm going to put a pause and just say, Gavin, did you want to jump in with anything? Is this triggering anything for you, or you have any thoughts or comments, questions?
Um, you must be in my head because this is something I'm going through right now. Yes, my mother, and right beside the computer is the whole things of me working this out. So yes, this is very interesting, and I've got slightly different stuff, but it is from that values-based perspective of, it wasn't I didn't have a horrible childhood. I was provided for, but the nurturing, when I go back, my mother never did any nurturing, and she did the teasing. And somehow as a kid, I've internalized, if I can't explain myself well enough, I'm not worthy of that love. So it was just low level enough. It slipped through all my life. And then a couple of years ago, my mother came out. She crossed way over the line. The excuses I made for her just, you no, couldn't do the cognitive dissonance anymore. It was the facing of that, and there was this avalanche of understanding of how big those beliefs have been in my life. So teasing it all apart and that, and I'm still working on it. So this is an incredibly timely thing here. So yes, but yeah, the teasing out which values there are and what's in play, and dealing with each of them separately is yeah, that's something that I didn't have the skill set for at all a few years ago, but then I've learned you don't have to feel just one thing about a situation, which doesn't make it simpler. You have to feel all of those things. So yes, thank you. This is incredibly timely, and I am very much paying attention to your prospects here.
Absolutely. And I think that like breaking it down in the way that Christina's outlining, like, why do I need to do this? How am I going to do this? And then being all of these, being in integrity with my values, being in integrity with my values. You can't see I'm making little hand gestures here. And then the third one, and then whatever the consequences are, being in integrity with whatever the consequences are. And that's important. Yeah.
For me, it was also just the understanding that it's not just the toxic person external to me, it's the toxic beliefs I have in myself. So a lot of my motive, two of my siblings, two of the four of our siblings have gone no contact with my mother. And now I'm just kind of like, I'm actually going to take this as an opportunity to tease out what actually is the problem here. And can I set boundaries that specifically protect my needs? And that way I have a better understanding of where they are, because they have crept up into my life, and I had a romantic partner where I got into the same dynamic that my mom and I had, and it was hugely bad and damaging. So yes, there's lots of reasons for it, but that's one of my reasons, is just the, hate to say it, the practical aspect of learning about myself and the selfish, how can I not be the type of person that gets myself into this situation?
Absolutely. And that is like always where we turn values based living inwardly first to figure out how am I learning something about myself? And through this process, you are gaining knowledge about what motivates you, what your unconscious motivators are, what your conscious motivators are. Um, and all of those pieces are, like you said, that front end of taking back your power from that toxic person, through the understanding of how they're triggering your values, and understanding how to do this. Once you've created that neutrality, then what comes next is much easier. The not doing this out of spite, not doing this in reaction, not doing this from a place of punishment or trying to control them. This is about you setting clear expectations of, here's what I need, and here's how I'm going to create that for myself. And then here's how I'm going to let you support me, whether you choose to or not. But that should always be the last piece, the very last part. What you're describing, exactly, you and Christina describing that I need to know what I want for myself that's better than this. And I need to know how to satisfy my values. And I need to know how to take those paths to create that.
Yeah. And one of the biggest things that I learned is anytime you're making these kind of big decisions, no matter what, you're going to have frustrated values and satisfied values. And it's up to you to decide, what are you going to accept as your values being frustrated at that time. So for example, again, as I had mentioned in my example, one of my top 5 values was connection. And that was the only top 5 value that was really frustrated. And that's why it was super difficult for me to make this decision, was because, am I going to accept that the connection between my mother is going to be severed? And as I teased it out, it wasn't just that I was frustrated, but it would also be satisfied in a different manner. It was satisfied because of the connection to myself, to my well-being, to my family during these times of stress, was going to be accepted. So as I worked through it, I was able to say, okay, and if this was the decision, here's all the values being satisfied and frustrated. In the end, am I going to be okay with those being frustrated? And if I am, I had to make a conscious acknowledgement that those are going to be dissatisfied, and I accept that, and it's not going to change. Focusing on the ones that are actually being satisfied. And so I don't know if that would help as well, but that was one of the things that was really important for me to actually understand, is that not everything is going to be satisfactory, and am I willing to live with that?
Absolutely. And what you're describing, Christina, is exactly the process in the values-based decision making course that we have, is mapping that out in a chart, or however we laid out it in a chart, but you can do it however you want if you want to do it longhand, to map those pieces out so that you're getting really deliberate in breaking this up, because it's not an easy thing to do, especially when it's a situation or a decision that you're making that is very personal, or you're highly triggered in. It's not easy to deconstruct and move through that. And it's a tricky thing, because we're asking people to be very in their heads around this chart, but also bring in their heart around, here's how I feel. And we move through both of those in the values based decision making. And there's also like this acknowledgement around like integrity of how I behave when I make these big decisions. And I think, Christina, you were mentioning before we started this session, there's a really big sort of mindset piece that is important to you. Do you want to share that?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things, and this actually comes out of the values-based decision-making workbook, says that living in integrity with my values also means that I will not force another person to be uncomfortable to please me or satisfy my values. And I acknowledge that they have their own values to meet and pursue. And that is something that has always stood out to me. Because again, another one of my values is judgment. And when people think of me as selfish, I really don't like that. But changing that perception of selfishness means self-love. It means connection with yourself. It means love for yourself. And as long as you are thinking of it for, what do I need to live in integrity with my own values, to protect myself, or to give whatever I need for myself out of love, then that is enough. To try and expect somebody else to change for you, or to meet that value of connection. Like, I spent 11 years trying to get that connection, and it was not happening. And it was more draining than anything. And that was my error, was I now wasted 11 years of my life trying to get somebody to appease my values, and it wasn't happening. So then I had to regain that control and only do what I can control, which is how I can satisfy myself, where that person is lacking.
Wow. And I put that in the workbook because it is such an important, like, we talk about radical acceptance of things that aren't lovely, and we have to be very careful, and we go down this path of like, I need to know what my values are, and I'm gonna act in integrity, and I'm gonna live all this, and then that should be the formula, should be for, and now my life is perfect, except it's not. Maddeningly, but it's not. And so obviously I haven't done something right. But here's the thing, is that the X factor is other bloody humans that we're interacting with. Just because I've been super clear about my values and what I would prefer and what I need, doesn't mean that that other person that I decided they should give that to me, doesn't mean that they're willing to do that. It exponentially increases the odds, if it's someone that you're in a loving relationship with, or even like a respectful relationship with, saying what you value, or what you need, or what's important to you, should let them want to do that, and also give them a goddamn clue how to do it, other than just like thinking it real loud, or just inundating them with how they're not doing it. Like being really clear with what I do prefer and how I'd like that to happen exponentially increases the odds of that happening. But it doesn't mean that it will happen because they have free will. And that is really important to values-based living, is to understand this radical like acceptance of life isn't perfect, but we can hold ourselves in integrity. We can make choices, and then we can choose again. So, like you guys are talking about, you can do your work, learn something new about yourself, put it out there. Here's what I need instead. And if they choose not to, that's important information. That's enough to then choose again. Now I make a different choice that holds you to account for what I need and you didn't give me. No big deal that you didn't give it. I mean, it hurts my heart, but I'm not going to hold you hostage to giving me what I need because I did the work to put it into words. And how dare you not give me what I need? Everybody has their own free will. Everybody has their own lives and they have their own values. And hopefully you have given them a path that they can now help you, or you've maybe inspired them to look inside their own truth, and where are they doing self-betrayal, and set them on a different path, or even inspire the people around you who are part of this, like your family and your friends that you're talking to or sharing your story with. We don't get to see exactly where all the ripple implications are, but we can know where we stand and what we've done and make sure that we're not accidentally frustrating our own values, because that we're operating, taking action, thinking thoughts, and experiencing emotions that are not in alignment with our own. Let's start with that. That's what we can control.
This is really good stuff.
Profound.
Mm-hmm. How are you feeling, Gavin?
Just to build on what you're talking about there, about not expecting others to meet all your values, it for me, it also helps me focus in on appreciating the people that do fill specific values. And even if those people don't fill all the buckets, that I start to appreciate just the parts in my life that they are very valuable in. So it's that both sides of that is a win.
Absolutely and truly. And it's an interesting space, like as we're talking about mothers, to be able to hold that they're also people. And for some reason, that is not an easy concept for the me as a child, that they have their own path to walk. And because they were here as life givers, doesn't mean that they knew how to nurture or how to put their own scary thoughts or need to control away to help me flourish, to help each of you flourish. It doesn't, just because they're moms doesn't mean they have that. And that's a really difficult concept. And as I've shared before, my mom recently passed. And for some reason, now that she's dead, that somehow has been easier for me to see her as a person, as opposed to a person who didn't provide me with a safe childhood, or a person who made choices to pass on her trauma. And now I'm like, I don't know why, I don't know how, but it's easier for me now. And I wish that like my wish is that we could all get there sooner. To just hold that, and it's not just these excuses of like they were doing their best. It's beyond that. It's deeper than that. It's um they're real people, and they brought beautiful things into our lives, not just giving us life. And we can hold space for that too. Where did they meet our values? Where did they hold beautiful space for us? What is that one occasion where they actually saw me instead of their ego version of me? And where can I be appreciative and grateful and honor that? Like I said, you can see why what I'm saying here. You can see why it would be easier after she's passed. than it is while she's still alive and still making those incursions, or breaking the contract that I feel she should have been living up to. But it'd be nice to be able to do that, and I wish that for other folks that didn't have to wait as long as I did. That's my hope and my dream. Did you want to add anything, either of you?
I don't know. This is just we went pretty deep here, and just need to kind of take it in. How about you, Kevin?
I'm doing really well, actually. Yeah, feeling seen. That's and please don't take that as light. That's something that I always somehow feel separate and apart from the world, and I live a lot of my life not expecting to be seen, which is, yes, need to work on that. But thank you very much for that. It's a lot of um, sharing a lot of intimate details that are just kind of like, okay, I'm not alone in this. This happens to other people, and it probably happens a fair bit as well, much more often than what I would have thought. It's not a rare occurrence. So, but yes, when you're talking about holding space and grace, and that's, yeah, it's part of my own journey in that was kind of a realization of uh, my mother lives her life contrary to one of my fundamental values. Like she is always playing power games with everyone around her, even the kids. And I live my life as I treat everyone as equal. I might be oblivious to it and I might be, not doing a good job, but when I'm aware of it, I try. I do not try and put myself above others. I don't judge how I'm doing based on who's above me and who's below me. It's that. And it was just kind of like all of this overwhelm. One of the things I pulled out is I'm kind of proud of myself for not turning out like that, even though I swam in that for decades. So yeah, there's a whole bunch of those little things that you kind of pull apart. There's the grief of losing my mother, even though she's still alive. And it was never who she was, it was who I thought she was, who I needed. And that's mixed in there with the feeling foolish because I think I'm very observant and see how the world works and oh my God, I did not see this. And I made excuses for the longest time. And what do I do with this? Because a lot of one of the skills I developed from this was that introspection and try to figure things out. That's probably why I became an engineer, is because like, why am I not worthy of blah? Well, how do I explain myself better? It's kind of like, okay, well, that was in service of something that I never should have pursued, but I developed a skill set from that. So what's the meaning out of all of this that I've come? And my way of processing all of this is just writing. And like I've taken a dozen, 20 opportunities to sit down and try and write a response to my mother, which is more about coming to terms with myself. Maybe she can benefit from it, maybe not. Either way, it sets out standards and boundaries and expectations and all of this. So like I said, probably 20 times I've sat down and the first half dozen was just ended up with me screaming. So there's no so walk away, go away for a few weeks, come back down. And then I started to finally work through it. And like you said, there's a whole bunch of, yeah, you ought to, and you did this to me, and blah, blah, blah. It was kind of like, okay, I'm glad I got that out. Now let's work on bringing the power back. It's the understanding she's not going to change. So how do I do this? So I've got 3 or 4 documents on the go, like what happened to me, just help myself feel heard. And then what's my response to her? And a bunch of that is trying to find where that line is between keeping a relationship going versus cutting off. So it's kind of a, what are my conditions if you want to improve this? Because, and then the last one is what I talked about of what's the meaning for this, and working on all four of those helps me triangulate something that makes me say, yeah, I'm comfortable with this. My values feel heard. Doesn't happen very often, and it's I'm calm about it, or I'm becoming more calm about it, which to me tells me my inner child is finally feeling heard about this. So it's kind of like, okay, it's exhausting and it's taken up everything in my life, but I'm almost there. Put this behind me, and the thought, the rumination thoughts that's finally going, I'm finally having the thoughts in my head of, I can't wait to put this behind me. And I know it's going to creep up every now and again, but in general, it's going to be behind me. So yes, all of that, the values talk on this about why do I feel so betrayed or let down or blah, blah, blah. It's kind of, oh, okay. And that clarity, that values-based clarity on here's the boundaries I'm going to impose going forward. Okay, good. So yes, it's been incredibly helpful, but what a mess and how draining to go through it. I just, I don't know what it is. Corrine, you said you were just so tenacious. Is that how you described it? I think it's kind of for me, it's an intellectual honesty of this has happened to me. I have to learn what I can out of it. Yeah, so, mess. Thank you, though. Thank you both.
What a great process, though, Gavin. The fact that you're writing out, okay, what are the facts? What are my values at play here? Let me get all the emotion out of my system. What do I need to tell her? What are my fears? What are my beliefs? What are my aspirations? What do I want out of this? And also, you're setting those, like, what am I actually expecting here? Like, if my mother is choosing to be respectful and if we want to continue on this relationship together, what do I need from her? But not just what I need from her, because then we're going back to that control, right? Because you can't expect them to appease you. You can definitely provide them with those boundaries and those expectations. But what are you going to do if they can't meet it? So what are you going to satisfy? How are you going to get what you need out of it? And when are you going to say that's enough? And are you okay with the outcome if you've done X, Y, and Z? That's all part of that process. And I found it really interesting when you were saying that you had grieved your mother, because that's actually exactly what I did. I grieved the woman that raised me, that I had a great childhood with. I reminisce in all of the things that I loved and I cherished, and I made sure she was aware of those. And I was able to then put it past me. That is no longer the person. That is no longer the mother that I have. And I accept that, because I've done everything I could and it was not changing. And so, yeah, I definitely mourned her. And so it was really interesting to hear that you felt the same way. And I'm sure there's lots of people out there that are going through the same thing, whether it's with family or spouses or, what have you. But yeah, I just wanted to share that bit.
Thank you, Christine. Yeah, one of the interesting things that I'm struggling with right now is that finding the balance between just saying, here's what I feel, here's what it did to me, here's my emotional truth, if you will, or whatever, and here are the facts that supported it. And I'm trying to work through my brain, because I've always tried to justify that I am legitimately feeling this way. And that's always something that, going down a wrong path there. But this is an exercise in where do I want to give some understanding of here's how I got here, without saying that where I got is up for debate. And that's something that I've never really done a very good job at. So this is one of those opportunities, like, what explanation do I owe That's one of those things I told you, the documents I'm writing is, do I just have to understand to myself, like, here are the facts, this is what it did to me, this is what I took from it, this is the beliefs that this is how that impacted my life. Okay, that's good for me. Do I owe that to them? Probably a little bit, probably enough just to say, you I don't think that this person understands the seriousness of, a switch has been flipped back from that. Like, this is not about forgiveness. This is not about going back to a relationship from before. This is figuring out a relationship going forward, if anything. So, forgiveness is the wrong thing to be talking about here. But what does that look like? And how do you navigate that and give them an opportunity versus is that sticking it to them? I don't want to do that. But if they want to, they should have some idea of what my expectations are on that. Or here are the hard boundaries. Yeah, it's a tough one to navigate. It's not objectively right, it's right for you. So what can you come up with what you're satisfied with? I think you were talking about that earlier, Christina, of just, am I satisfied with this? These values being met, these ones being frustrated. Okay. Yeah. And I'm getting closer.
Yeah, I would say yes, you are getting closer. This is a long journey, and it's you take it very seriously, and you are putting in the right work, and that's why this is so intense. It's not just like, well, she sucks, she's out, right? It's more than that. You owe you recognize that you deserve more than that. You deserve to know why this is not working for you, and there is an element like what you're describing. She deserves to know why this isn't working for you, and just where you're at. And I would say that there's tools like values-based statements. Because I value this isn't going to work, or this is what I need. And they're short, they're succinct, and they're unfuckwithable. And they're designed to be like that, because she can't come back and say, no, you don't value that, because that's an illogical response. She could, but it's an illogical response, and you can, put that in your like fuck off bucket, right? Like that's an easy one to dismiss. And she could come back with a more logical response and saying, I see that you value that. I needed to understand why why this isn't working for you. And that was important for me to know. If she's capable of that, cool. And if she's not, you've done your work and you understand you better. And I think this important space of not doing this to punish, but to create a life, like Christina was saying, create a life. And Gavin, you said it too, going forward. What do I need in my life going forward? This isn't about punishing you for the past. This is about getting clear with what I need. And also being open, like in that assertive space, like your needs are just as important as mine. And if you have the capacity and competence to come with me, I will demonstrate how to have a values-based conversation about our needs, our shared values. Maybe we can put together something more meaningful and appropriate. Maybe not, but you're holding space for them just as much. And they might just say no, thank you, or just demonstrate that they can't. And that's cool too. The last piece I'll add too is radical acceptance. I think is the piece that's missing, possibly with where you're at right now, Gavin. Of it's like a statement that's like, because I value this, I needed that. Because I value acceptance, and I didn't get that from you, and I really needed that, and I deserved that, and I didn't get it. And that's okay. You weren't capable of doing that, or you weren't aware that I needed that. Doesn't matter. I didn't get it, but I really, really needed that. And I didn't get it. And that's okay, because I can give that to myself now. I'm a grown ass adult. I can give acceptance to myself. And it's even more fulfilling now because it's coming from an internal space of validation, even more beautiful than an external validation. As a child, you sure needed that and you didn't get it, but it would have made a big difference to little Gavin. That acceptance or whatever that I needed to be heard or seen, and you couldn't give that to me. And that fucking sucked because that would have made a huge difference in my life. And I may have been a different person, but I also wouldn't have been on the journey that I'm on. And that matters. I didn't get it. And here I am. I'm still here.
I think I've been working on that. For me, it shows up as just accepting the past as it was and stop putting value judgments on all of those instances in the past. It was just, this is what happened and this is what led to me. And yes, it sucked that that's the way it was, but if it was different, I'm not sure I would recognize the person I would have become now. So like I would have been so different if I had some of those things or some of those things went differently. So kind of what's the point here? That's you know, almost a betrayal of self if you're wanting things to be different in the past. So it's kind of like, okay, that's what it is. This is what happened. This is how I took it. This is how those lessons I've internalized have impacted my life. Okay. The past is the past, can't be changed.
Can't control it.
Sorry?
Oh, sorry. I said you can't control it.
No, it's just there. So understand from it, learn from it, stop ruminating on it, trying to change it, because despite all the sci-fi shows I've watched, there's no time travel, so can't go back. Ah, well.
And even if you could, you know that you can't make any changes with disrupt the time space continuum. We know this.
You know, I think that was part of but that desire has probably been a big part in my life because I was when I was younger, I was really into video games. I had to just stop because I enjoyed doing the same thing over and over again until you right. And that love the time travel movies, the chance to go over do it again, that fantasy, and that's all right. That desire is deep in me, and that's not healthy in a lot of ways. It's fun in other ways, but it's not healthy in a lot of ways. Radical acceptance, yes, learning that.
That's beautiful. I've met me, and that and understanding at a young age that that's an addiction trigger and being like, oof, caution, caution, as opposed to like, ooh, let's go deeper. That is a very mature perspective to take, like, ooh, that's not healthy. And I want healthy. And I want you to notice that that's a really important thing that you did at a young age and put that on your figure out how to tease out a value from that because you made a conscious decision to change your life because there was something better than that you wanted more than how good that addiction of that thing felt. Just saying. A little like I want to be healthy. I want to be balanced. I want something is important in there that I want you to like celebrate and bring to the forefront. It's possible you've already identified that value, but there might be one or tied to one that you've already identified that could be really important. And I just want to land on this one. What you said was wanting something to be different than it was is a type of self-betrayal of not honoring who I am. If I wanted something to happen differently in the past, then I wouldn't be who I am. And now be who I am. Oh, sorry, am I glitching? I'm getting a message. Yeah, sorry, guys. But I just think that's a really, really cool space. And that radical acceptance is a really emotional experience of I wanted something different. I could even say I deserve something different versus I can intellectually say it. Yeah, I wanted that. I didn't get it. And I just want to just point at the difference between those two experiences. I deserved that. It would have made a big difference. I should have got that and I didn't. I needed that and I didn't. And I'm okay now, but I really needed that. And just let it sit in your body as opposed to stay in an intellectual thought of, yeah. And there's something about spiritual bypassing in that intellectualizing versus experiential, letting that be part of my grieving process. I should have got that and I didn't. And just be like, I didn't, and let that be like heartbreaking. And I don't want to like dramatize. That's totally a word. But it's a little bit different. I just want to hold that for a second.
Yeah. No, I think that's my writing process. That's kind of a negotiation between my intellectual self and my emotional self. So once I'm calm with it, it's kind of like, okay, we've had a good conversation. We're on the same page. Because the emotional self is not bound by the realities of the physical world, and reality gets a veto on what we get to experience. So okay, need to accept that. And yeah, everyone you encounter has a vote on with the reality you get to experience. So you respect that they're voting and appreciate the people that support you and identify the people in situations that don't. So yeah, I think I am doing that. I probably explain it a bit a different way. It's kind of like that the conversation between the intellectual and emotional self. So as I've gone from the first half dozen times sitting down and just screaming to okay, to now this is just a horrible blah of here's the horrible things done to me, to I'm a very calm. The last couple iterations of this have been much more calming. And it's interesting because every time I sit down, I pull up the previous version and how do I edit this? And I just kind of sweep it aside and just start again. And it's wow, that I don't do any writing like that for anything. So yeah, there's a conversation going on between the intellectual self and the emotional self. So yeah, I,
Yeah, I believe you. Oh, and it's I believe you mostly because I can see how deep your process is and how far you're moving. You couldn't be moving in these leaps and bounds that you're making without that head heart coherence happening in the in between times. Um, yeah, Christina, we're coming to the end of the hour here. Is there anything that you, God, time flies, hey? Is there anything that you want to add to round this out before we close?
Yeah, I just think that this was a really profound conversation, and I really hope that I know for you, Gavin, you have gotten something out of this, and I hope for those that are listening in after the fact that they get to take something away. Um, we all have to face a major decision in our life, one way or another, and it's really nice to have all the tools in your arsenal to be able to make the decision, but also stand firm in it, especially when people start to judge you or ask you why or start to try and pick your decision apart, because it's going to happen. And also making sure that you don't have remorse. As long as you did it within integrity, then you can hold firm in your decision because you have done the deep dive, you've done the work to know what you yourself needed, and you acted in integrity and not out of spite. Um, yeah, so that's just my takeaway, just some important things that I wanted to make sure that we wrapped up with.
I love
Thank you
it.
so much for having these conversations. It was good.
Mhm. Yeah, same. And I think that's enough to round us out. There's nothing more to add for me too. It's been a beautiful conversation, and I thank each of you. And I also honor my contribution to this too. We're here, we're vulnerable, and we're telling our stories, and we're um, really sharing this experience to say we're going through similar things, not exactly the same. But it sure helps to know that we're going through similar things together in this really bumpy journey as we're trying to just live our damn best life here, trying to make good choices. It's lovely. Thank you both.